For Creamer Media's Policy, I'm Sashni Murthy. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary of South Africa's political scene. Hi, Professor.
Hi.
The anti-corruption marches of civil society and NUMSA, as well as the recent student demonstrations and the EFF march, have created a sense of changing political realities. What is your view?
Yes, on the one hand, young people are talking about revolution and things like this, and you can be cynical, but certainly there have been very important developments in this period. There were two years ago, NUMSA decided not to support the alliance, the ANC, in the elections, and after that, a great deal hasn't really happened, although they initiated this anti-corruption march together with civil society organisation, and it seemed quite a respectable number of people that they brought out there. But it's been completely overshadowed by the scale of the student protests, which has brought to the fore not merely questions of fees must fall, but the entire character of post-apartheid South Africa. To what extent, I wrote in my article last week, to what extent is it really post-apartheid when white people form human shields, because the expectation is, and it's a correct expectation, that the ones who are likely to be clubbed or shot are actually black people in the main. So that 20 years after apartheid, there is this continuity. They're the same people who are shot, executed, whatever it is. They're black people in the main. There's some whites, but still primarily black people. There is this continuity, so that the fees must fall and the demand for equal access to education is actually a demand that is based on transformation of South Africa, where blackness is not a barrier to continuing your education to the highest level of which you are capable. And at this point in time, people are excluded not because they are not competent to get their PhDs or whatever it is, but because they don't have the money. And some of them have not got their certificates yet, etc., etc. But we need to understand also that the student movement, although it is like this massive phenomenon, it's actually very distinct in its qualities. Like when the minister announced that they would not implement the 0%, the 10% fee rise, UCT and WITS have resources, they have donors, they have reserves of their own, which UWC doesn't have. Now, University of the Western Cape has traditionally had lower fees than other universities. But if you look at the exchanges between the rector and the students at UWC, you can see that he says in relation to outsourcing that if we were to implement this now, it would bankrupt the university. So we need to understand that when students and workers put forward demands, let's say you put forward a demand to Lonmin. Lonmin has made huge profits at times when the platinum price was high, and it's got reserves, so it can meet various demands, like it did meet that 12% demand. Now, in the case of an institution like a university that's not earning money on a large scale, when it's suddenly hit by removal of some source of funding that it expects to get, it is sometimes very difficult to meet that demand. The same, I reckon, will be true of NMU perhaps, of NWU, TUT, not Stellenbosch. Stellenbosch is a very wealthy place. Stellenbosch can do a lot of things. I mean, you know, if you walk in Stellenbosch, it's so well looked after that if you want to drink water out of the drains, it would probably be as pure as Valprey, you know. That's how wealthy the place is. It's really well looked after, and the university is well endowed. So we need to understand that there are these differences. So the student movement has come like an avalanche, and it's created this massive impression. And it's interesting that the EFF was able, in this atmosphere, without a lot of prior publicity, like the anti-corruption march had a lot of prior publicity, came and it pulled anything between 30 and 60,000 people there, probably 10 times as many as the anti-corruption march and the NUMSA marches. And they were very disciplined. There were no incidents. They went to a number of places in a very organized way. They showed that they have great logistical capacity to organize this. So I think we need to ask ourselves we need to have a better analysis. And I've seen very few analyses of the EFF. They just say they're fascist or they are left-wing, and it's not really grappling with what their character is, what their demands are, how they are setting about realizing them. And I think we've really got to get to work with understanding this, because clearly they are not weakening. If you can pull out 60,000 people just in Gauteng, it's quite a substantial thing.
And what does this mean for the various NUMSA projects, especially its United Front?
You see, the NUMSA project has always been ambiguous about the relationship between the United Front, the Movement for Socialism, and a possible left party. Some people tend to treat them all as one. And the effect of that is that everything tends to have a class inflection, to be transformed into working class demands and socialism. And if we look at the student protests, a lot of it was connected with racism. The complaints about the curriculum, the symbols, and all of these things are not directly about capitalism, although Rhodes is a big capitalist, but they are actually about colonial and racist legacies and needing to reassert black pride, blackness, hence the significance of the revival of Steve Biko's writings. So my feeling is the NUMSA project has proved to be without the tools for analyzing this, the emergence of the student movement on the one hand in all of its facets. And from what I can see, NUMSA did say they support the students, but I have not seen a statement from the United Front. And the United Front, it's not clear what they have done. It was supposed to be drawing on some of the lessons of the United Democratic Front of the 1980s, but it's not clear to what extent they have drawn in community organizations. That is, organizations that speak about things that worry people in Kwatema, Duduza, Kagiso, all these places. And these are not factory floor demands in the main. And when they had their conference, I don't think they've had an official launch as far as I'm aware. They've never elected of any, they've not had any elections. And the people who were drawn into it were, in the main, unelected NGOs or individuals, so that you don't have any elected people there. It represents no one. And I think this means that if they don't have a body of organizations, of communities, they're not really tuned in to what is going on. And the EFF march and the student protests may have blown this, what they call the NUMSA moment, they may have blown it out of the water because it was too class reductionist, and it failed to take into account that people are not just working class. They live, and their children live, in a number of different aspects as people who are still suffering oppression as black people.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Policy about a political flux.